Review of Unit 2. Elasticity. In this section, we study meaning of price elasticity of demand, types of elasticity, elastic, inelastic, perfectly inelastic, unitary elastic, calculating elasticity, endpoint formula, midpoint formula using averages, elasticity along a linear demand curve and total revenue, determinants of elasticity of demand, cross and income elasticity of demand, elasticity of supply, formula, types, and determinants of elasticity of supply. Elasticity of demand. Elasticity in simple words means responsiveness. The law of demand says when price increases, demand decreases, and when price decreases, demand increases. The elasticity of demand tells us how much demand has decreased as a result of price rise or by how much demand has increased by price fall. The responsiveness or the sensitivity of consumers to a price change is measured by a product's price elasticity of demand. Types of elasticity. There are mainly 5 types of elasticity: elastic, inelastic, unit elastic, perfectly inelastic. Modest price changes cause very large changes in the quantity purchased. Economists say that the demand for such products is relatively elastic or simply elastic. For some products, for example, restaurant meals, prices of car, consumers are highly responsive to price changes. If substantial price changes cause only small changes in the amount purchased, the demand for such products is relatively inelastic or simply inelastic. For example, toothpaste, salt, gasoline, or any other necessities, consumers pay much less attention to price changes. If a change in price brings about a same change in quantity demanded, it is called unit elasticity. Extreme cases, where a price change results in no change whatsoever in the quantity demanded, economists say that demand is perfectly inelastic, where a small price causes buyers to increase purchases from zero to all they can obtain, and economists call this as perfectly elastic. Calculating elasticity, the price elasticity coefficient and formula, endpoint formula. A coefficient tells us the proportion at which a change in price changes quantity. A coefficient of -2, for example, tells us that a price increase of a given percentage will cause twice as much decrease in quantity. Economists measure the degree to which demand is price elastic or inelastic with a coefficient ED defined as elasticity of demand is calculated by the formula percentage change in quantity demanded over percentage change in price, or change in delta QD over change in delta P. A percentage change in QD is calculated by current QD minus original QD over original QD times 100. Percentage change in price is calculated by current price minus original price over original price times 100. For example, if the price of oil increases by 10% and quantity demanded falls by 5%, then elastic demand for oil is change in quantity demanded, that is -5%, over change in price, that is 10%, which is -0.5, or in absolute terms it is 0.5. So the elasticity of demand are always negative because price and demand are inversely related. So we typically drop the negative sign and use absolute value instead. Endpoint formula problem. Elasticity should be the same whether the price rises or falls along the same demand curve, but it is different when calculated with endpoint formula. For example, when the quantity changes, for example, from 10 to 20, it is 100%. But when quantity falls from 20 to 10 along the identical demand curve, it is a 50%. The problem is which one use 100% or 50% in the numerator of the elasticity formula. The midpoint formula using averages. An alternative method of calculating the coefficient of elasticity, the midpoint elasticity formula uses the average, that is midpoint, as a base value for calculating percentage changes. Elastic demand equals delta Q, which is the change in quantity demanded, which is calculated by Q2 minus Q1 over average of Q, that is Q2 plus Q1 over 2 times 100, and percentage change in price is delta P, that is P2 minus P1 over average price, that is P2 plus P1 over 2 times 100. For example, at the initial price of $10, the quantity demanded is 100. When the price rises to $20, the quantity demanded falls to 90. What is the elasticity? So you can see the calculated elasticity here using the formula of using average or the midpoint formula, and we get the answer as negative 0.158. Instantly, the ambiguity does not arise with supply because price and quantity supplied are positively related, so elasticity and supply coefficient therefore are positive numbers. Interpretation of elasticity of demand or types of elasticity of demand. So if the elasticity of demand is greater than 1, then demand is elastic. You can see the graph is flat, or it's more horizontal, because a 22% price rise in flour result in 67% decrease in quantity demanded. It means that the consumers respond strongly to the changes in price in case of elastic demand. So goods that have elastic demand curves are products that are not a necessity, products where there are many substitutes, and products that are relatively expensive. So such goods are highly elastic in nature. And consumers are sensitive to the changes in price, and even a slightest change in prices will bring about a very large changes in the quantity demanded. The second type is when elastic demand equals infinity. Such demand are called perfectly elastic demand. When the consumers demand any quantity at one maximum price, the demand curve is perfectly elastic. Consumers are perfectly sensitive to the price change. Perfectly elastic demand curve are horizontal, but it is an extreme case which we usually do not find in a real world. The third is elastic demand is less than 1, that is, demand is inelastic. If a 22% increase in price leads to 11% decrease in quantity demanded, then demand is inelastic. That is, there is only little change in the quantity demanded to the changes in price. The consumers do not respond strongly to the changes in quantity demanded. So graphically it is more vertical or steeper. Goods that have inelastic demand curves tend to be products that are necessities, products where there are few substitutes, products that are relatively inexpensive. So for such goods, the consumers do not mind or their buying pattern does not change to the changes in price. It remains more or less the same. So the fourth one is elastic demand equals 0, which is called perfectly inelastic demand. This is an extreme case. If consumers demand the same quantity of a good regardless of the price, the demand curve is perfectly inelastic. Consumers are perfectly insensitive to the price change. Perfectly inelastic demand curves are vertical. The last one is elastic demand equals 1, which is called unit elasticity of demand. A unit elastic demand curve will have price increase cause proportional decreases in quantity demanded. The summary of coefficient formula: if the absolute value of coefficient is greater than 1, it is relatively elastic or elastic, less than 1, relatively inelastic or inelastic, equal to 1, unit elasticity, 0, perfectly inelastic, infinity, perfectly elastic. Elasticity and slope are not the same. A linear demand curve has a constant slope but a varying elasticity. This is true because it is the ratio of changes in the two variables, whereas elasticity is the ratio of percentage changes in the two variables. Figure shows the way in which elasticity changes along a linear demand curve. At the midpoint of the demand curve, elasticity is unitary, equal to 1. At higher prices, demand is elastic, top part of the midpoint, and at lower prices, bottom part of the midpoint, demand is inelastic. The total revenue is the price of the item times total units of the output sold, that is P times Q. In the table, we see a pattern of total revenue increasing initially as price falls, then reaches maximum, then total revenue starts to price fall. So if we graph, it will be a parabolic shape. Relation between total revenue and elasticity. One of the very useful features of elasticity is that knowing the value of price elasticity allows us to quickly see what happens to a firm's revenue as it raises and cuts its prices. When demand is inelastic, raising prices will raise revenues. When demand is elastic, price increase reduces revenue. The figure shows a relation between linear demand curve and total revenue curve. In the figure, the total revenue is at its maximum and demand at its unitary or midpoint. The reason as to why the total revenue curve go up first, then fall back down is total revenue changes only when either price changes or quantity demanded changes. In the downward sloping linear curve, on the top half of the midpoint, as sellers changes their price and lowers their price and put things on sale, people respond strongly to the price fall. Increase in quantity outweighs the decrease in price and total revenue goes up. On the other hand, if the price rises, customers have strong reaction. Decrease in quantity demanded outweighs price rise. Therefore, in the elastic range, price and total revenue move in opposite direction. As price falls or moves downwards, total revenue increases or moves upwards and vice versa. If you lower your price in inelastic range, further down the other half of the midpoint, customers are not really reacting strongly to the price fall. Your decrease in price is really not offset by large increase in the quantity demanded. Therefore, when you lower your price in the inelastic range, your total revenue is going to fall. Price and total revenue move in the same direction in the inelastic half of this graph. Total revenue test for price elasticity. If total revenue changes in the opposite direction from price, demand is elastic. If total revenue changes in the same direction as price, demand is inelastic. If total revenue does not change when price changes, demand is unit elastic. Solve problem. Suppose at a price of $50, a company sells 300 items. When it lowers its price to $40, it sells 400 items. Is demand elastic, inelastic, or unitary? Solution is price times Q is total revenue. So total revenue before price fall is $50 times 300 units, that is $1,500. So after total revenue after price fall is $40 times 400, that is $16,000 is the total revenue. So when price falls and total revenue increases, demand is elastic. Because price and total revenue are moving in opposite direction. Determinant of elasticity of demand. The first one is substitutability. If the good has lot of substitute, then the demand will be more elastic. The second is luxury versus necessity items. For luxury items, the demand is elastic, and for necessities, it is inelastic. The price change will not bring any impact on the buying pattern of the buyers for necessities. The third is percentage of household budget. The larger the percentage of household budget, the more is the elastic is demand. And for the smaller the percentage, the more inelastic is the demand. The length of time since price change. The more time that has passed, the more elastic demand is. In the short run, it is harder to change consumption habits or find substitute, therefore it is more inelastic in the short run. Income elasticity of demand. Income elasticity of demand shows how quantity demanded of a good changes in response to changes in consumer income. So it is calculated by percentage change in quantity or percentage change in income. The three important ranges to know for elasticity of income are: if the elasticity of income is less than 0, that is negative, then it is an inferior good. Example, canned meat. The amount of good desired or consumed is negatively correlated to income. It means that we buy less of it, the more income we make, and vice versa. So if the elasticity of income is between 0 and 1, or it is positive but less than 1, then it is a normal or a necessity good, example milk. If it is elasticity of income is greater than 1, then it is a luxury good or a normal good. Example, big screen TV. The amount of good or desired or consumed is positively correlated to the income. We buy more of the good, the more income we make, and vice versa. Solve problem. If Ali's income increases from 36,000 to 40,000 and the amount of donuts he consumes increases from 52 per year to 86, calculate the income elasticity of demand. What type of goods are donuts for Ali? So we have calculated by using the formula, we calculated the elasticity of income as 4.9, which is greater than 1. So the donuts are a normal or a luxury goods. The second example is Supreet received a 10% raise in income. As a result, her demand for ground beef decreased to 15%. Calculate the income elasticity of demand. Is ground beef a normal or inferior good? So after calculation, we know that it is, which is negative 1.5. Therefore, the ground beef is an inferior good since it is less than. Cross price elasticity of demand. Cross price elasticity of demand measures how a price change of one good affects the quantity demanded of another good. So formula is percentage change in quantity of good X over percentage change in price of good Y. If the cross elasticity is negative, then goods are complements, that is consumed together, example cookies and milk. When cross elasticity is negative, we know that X and Y increase the price of one, decreases the demand for the other. So the two are a complementary goods. For example, a decrease in the price of digital cameras will increase the number of memory sticks purchased. The larger the negative cross elasticity coefficient, the greater is the complementarity between the two goods. Second is, if the cross elasticity is positive, then goods are substitutes. Can use good B in place of good A. Example, Lucerne butter and Dairyland butter. If cross elasticity of demand is positive, meaning that sales of X move in the same direction as a change in the price of Y, then X and Y are substitute goods. An example of Evian water X and Dasani water Y. An increase in the price of Evian causes consumers to buy more Dasani, resulting in the positive cross elasticity. The larger the positive cross elasticity coefficient, the greater is the substitutability between the two products. If the cross elasticity is equal to positive or negative infinity, then goods are either perfect complements or perfect substitutes. If cross elasticity is zero, goods are unrelated. A zero or near zero cross elasticity suggests that the two products being considered are unrelated or independent goods. An example is walnut and plums. You would not expect a change in the price of walnuts to have any effect on purchase of plums and vice versa. Solved problem. The price of tea increased from $1.20 to $1.50 per box. The quantity of scones demanded changed from 10 units to 8 units. Calculate the cross elasticity of demand. Comment on the relationship between the two goods. The cross elasticity after calculation is -1, so therefore the scones and tea are complements. A 12% rise in the price of cookies increases the quantity of muffins demanded by 24% and decreases the quantity of cookies demanded by 18%. Calculate the cross elasticity of demand between cookies and muffins. So after calculation, the elasticity coefficient is 2, which is greater than 1. Therefore, muffins and cookies are substitutes. Price elasticity of price of a good. Elastic supply. We can also measure the price elasticity of supply. This is similar to the definition for price elasticity of demand, but now we measure how the quantity supplied of a good changes in response to the market price of the good, or how the producer responds to the changes in the prices. The elastic supply is always positive since price and the quantity supplied are positively correlated. So formula is percentage change in quantity supplied over percentage change in price. So these are the types of price elasticity of supply. The first one is, if the supply is elastic, then the elastic coefficient will be greater than 1. On the graph it will be more flatter in nature. So it means that producers respond strongly to the changes in price. The second one is supply is inelastic, then the elastic quotient will be less than 1. On a graph it will be a steep, the curve will be steep. It means that the producers, less response by the producers to the price change. The third one is, if the supply is perfectly elastic, then the elastic quotient is infinite. It will be on the graph, it will be a horizontal straight line. It means that suppliers are willing to produce infinite amount of something as long as they receive a certain price. The fourth one is a perfectly inelastic supply. The elastic coefficient will be equal to 0, and on a graph it is a vertical straight line. It means that no response by producers to the price change. This usually happens for a limited supply of goods, or just such as rare antiques. Fifth one is a linear line equals unitary elastic supply. So the elastic quotient will be equal to 1. The producer responds proportionately to the changes in prices. Determinants of elasticity of supply. The first one is length of time since price change. It means the supply responds differently to the different time to the changes in price. When the price changes in the very immediate market period or in a very short period, the supply is inelastic. It is so, therefore, in the first figure, it is a vertical straight line. Supply cannot immediately respond to the changes in price in that period, but in the short period, it is relatively inelastic, or you can say slightly elastic, but it becomes more elastic or respond to the changes in price in the long term. Perishability of good. Perishable goods are relatively inelastic. Substitutability of output. If the input goods are easily be switched to produce an alternative final product, then supply is more elastic. This is the elasticity summary sheet, and it shows all the 4 types of elasticity we discussed here: price elasticity of demand, cross elasticity of demand, income elasticity of demand, price elasticity of supply.